So here we are. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Let's wait a couple of minutes more while more people continue joining. We have already more than 30 participants, but let's wait a little bit longer. In between, I will give you some organizational issues and presenting our speakers today. But anyway, hello everyone. It's wonderful to have you here today. There are people from all over the place. Thank you for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for some. Thank you a lot. My name is Camilo Lozano. I work at the Center for Agricultural Landscape and Research, ZALF, in Germany. I will be your moderator today. Again, I would like to tell you welcome to this webinar entitled Sustainability Impact Assessment, Introducing ScalA-Peacebuilding Tool for Ex-ante Impact Assessment. This webinar is part of a series of webinars aiming to present concepts and tools for the effective assessment of environmental and peace-building practices in conflict-affected scenarios. Many of the practical examples we will show in this series of webinars are part of a project called Implementing Sustainable Agricultural and Livestock Systems for Simultaneous Targeting of Forest Conservation, Climate Change Mitigations, and Peacebuilding in Colombia. This project is financed by BMU and part of the International Climate Initiative. Today, we will be joined by two remarkable speakers. They will show our face now. Hello, Katarina. We are seeing you now. Hey there. Who is there? Jana. And we wait for Tatiana. Hello, everyone. I will introduce to you. I will introduce them to you later on. Before, I would like to tell you a very practical issue regarding the questions and research. There is a panel that we organized at the end of the webinar, the last 15 minutes. In this panel, we will answer some of your questions. For doing so, please locate at this moment on the right side of the GoToWebinar control panel. There is a small box which says questions. So in that box, you can write your questions, and after I collect them and I pass them to the presenters, and at the end of the webinar I will read them, and hopefully we have many, and then our presenters will answer them. I also would like you to be aware that we will record the webinar, and then you can request it and we can send it back to you. So no worries if you miss something, a slide. The important thing is to pay attention, and then we can send the recording. Okay, let's see how many we have. We have a good number, so I think that we can officially begin. So let's go, and then I will present you now our panelists. There are Dr. Jana, Dr. Katarina, and our colleague Tatiana. Dr. Jana Schindler, she will start and she will present us a sustainability impact assessment. Dr. Jana is an expert on rural development, agroecology, participatory planning. She studies geography, rural development, and she's also a PhD holder on sustainable impact assessment. She works currently at Oxfam, where coordinates several development projects in sub-Saharan Africa. Thanks a lot, Jana, for accepting the invitation. Yeah, there you go. Our second presenter is Katarina. Many of you know her, but for those of you who doesn't know her, she will be talking about how to embed peace-building indicators into a sustainability impact assessment framework. Katarina, in addition to work at ZALF, she also works she's a lecturer at Humboldt University in different subjects like environmental peace building, transdisciplinary and participatory research. Katarina also has an extensive academic background, including studies in African affairs, educational sciences, conflict and development, and holds a PhD in conflict and prevention and management. Thank you, Katarina. There you go. Hello. Finally, we have Tatiana. Tatiana worked with us. She's our colleague. She worked at ZALF, and also she's making her PhD studies at Humboldt University in Berlin. And she will show us her research and let us know how the practicalities of conducting this ex-ante sustainable impact assessment. Her work focused on agroforestry systems in Colombia, and she will try to tell us how this can contribute simultaneously to peace building, climate change mitigation, and sustainable rural development. Tatiana, thanks a lot for being here. I present you, all of you, and now we can officially begin our webinar. So I am gladly giving the floor to Jana. May you now present, Jana, you can begin your presentation, and I see you later. Jana, the floor is yours. The virtual room. Okay, now we have seen your presentation.
Good. I just wanted to be sure. Thank you, Camilo, for the introduction.
Wait.
Can you see?
Now it's good. Now it's good. We are seeing the presentation. Thank you.
You can see my presentation. Okay, excellent. Okay, so thank you, Camilo, for the introduction. My name is Jana. I've also been working with ZALF before, but nowadays I'm working with an international organization. And before I start my presentation, I just wanted to emphasize that I'm not speaking in the name of the organization I'm working with at the moment, but that I'm expressing my own view. So I have the pleasure to give you some insights today into sustainability impact assessment. And I am starting my presentation with this nice picture from Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland. Some of you might know it. And for me, it's a creative way which picturizes the need of impact assessment. Maybe some of you know this scene where Alice meets this cat sitting in the tree. And Alice asks the cat which way she shall go. And the cat says, well, this depends which way you want to go and where you want to go to. And Alice says, well, I don't really know where I want to go to. And then the cat says, well, in this case, of course, it doesn't matter which way you take because you will surely get somewhere. And well, for us, of course, in the real world, in our real life, it does matter which way we take and where we want to go, and that we take the right direction to get to our predefined results, outputs, outcomes, and impacts. And in order to know if we are on the right track, we do impact assessment. So I will give you a very short introduction into impact assessment and its backgrounds. I will give you some sustainability impact characteristics. Furthermore, I will present you the steps of conducting a sustainability impact assessment, and then it will lead to a conclusion. There is a steadily growing interest in impact and in measuring impact, a lot more than measuring output and an outcome. You might know this. Maybe just to give you a short example, what it means and what's the difference now of impact, output, and outcome is like, let's say maybe we have a project, and in this project we dig a well, then the well would be the output. The outcome would be that there's more access to clean water and that the people have access to water. And the impact would be, for example, that there are less waterborne diseases and there are more and more stakeholders, donors, decision makers, organizations themselves who implement projects who have this interest to measure the impact of their policy or their project. And this is also why theory and practice of impact assessment are expanding enormously rapidly. And nowadays, there's a large number of impact assessments which are related to different types. For example, environmental impact assessment, social impact assessment, economic impact assessment, which can be realized at different levels, local, national, regional, and which have also different targets measuring the impact of policies, programs, projects. And there is, at the moment, we can say there's more focus still on ex post evaluation than on ex-ante impact assessment at project level. And there are also no internationally established standards for carrying out ex-ante evaluations at project level. The new approach to impact assessment is a sustainability impact assessment, and it is quite free in its, let's say, methodology, which is defined by Pope and Bond, which are like one of the most important authors, let's say, when it comes to sustainability impact assessment, or have published most about it, who say that this is a strength, because sustainability impact assessment needs flexibility and a context-specific approach. Maybe to come back again, what is impact assessment and how is it defined? Impact assessment in itself, regarding the International Association for Impact Assessment, is the process that identifies future consequences of an intended action. And so it's meant to be before we in fact implement a policy, a program, a project. And sustainability impact assessment is still at a very early development phase. We can say there's no common definition which defines it, but it's said to be a process that supports the decision-making towards sustainable development in a given context, or that it is an integrated assessment which accounts for economic, environmental, and social impacts. So it is sustainability impact assessment itself is the only impact assessment that considers and integrates those three dimensions of sustainability in an equal manner. And it is conducted, this is also very important, and a very important characteristic of sustainability impact assessment, that it is conducted during a very early stage of project planning or policy formulation, which is also quite different from most other impact assessments, because most other impact assessment evaluate a proposal or formulation just before its decision making, but not really at the start of creating this policy or project. And what is also important is that most other impact assessments, they evaluate a program or policy against their own goal, while sustainability impact assessment assesses really whether this proposed policy, project, program will really contribute to sustainable development. This is again just to picturize again what is sustainability impact assessment. There are different assessments in order to evaluate economic impacts, environmental impacts, social impacts. But sustainability impact assessment is doing it at a time and not next to each other, but in an integrated way, and looks really for the interrelations of economy, social, and environmental impacts. So what is important is that it follows more qualitative approaches, and that it looks for complexity and it allows complexity. And with this complexity, it is also an approach, or the methodological approaches that are used to do sustainability impact assessment are most likely more time consuming and also sometimes more costly. But it is important to use sufficient time and space needed in order to do this sustainability impact assessment, to really be connected and adapted to the local context where it is applied. And even the number and nature of indicators is not always predefined, and it is also not really limited. It is really the requirement to involve stakeholders in order at every step of the impact assessment, but also to develop the impact assessment criteria, most likely in a bottom-up approach. Meaning that the stakeholders themselves, those people who are concerned by this policy, by this program, that they are really actively involved in order to define them, and that it is not necessarily the researchers who define the criteria and break them down as indicators in order to be evaluated then. So what is important, that stakeholders are involved and that the views of all affected parties are integrated. I want to give you just a short example of a project that was also done with ZALF. It was on agricultural measures to improve food security in Tanzania. And it was really like a, let's say, a people-led approach. The farmers themselves, they were able to decide on the agricultural measures which were supposed to be implemented in their village and which they tested. What we did beforehand, well, they decided on the measures, but what we did alongside, let's say, they defined themselves what do they understand as food security, and what are the indicators and components that are important to improve their for their food security, but also to improve their food security. And from that, we, or the farmers themselves, created indicators. And what we did then is that we compared the measures that they've decided for with those indicators. And this is what you can see here on the second picture below. That where we could identify with the farmers together where are challenges, where are maybe potential conflicts that we have to look at before we implement or during implementation. So it allowed us to identify those potential conflicts beforehand, which was very valuable. So I'm not, as I said before, I mean, sustainability impact assessment does not have this one methodological approach. So I cannot present you this methodological approach now with this summary that I'm giving you. But sustainability impact assessment still follows some general steps, let's say. This is first a screening of a proposal, of course, to understand very well the proposal, the project, and the context. Then prepare your assessment, select really appropriate methodology, tools, and collect knowledge. What is very important then is to really ensure the stakeholder involvement. Then furthermore, the analysis of economic, environmental, and social impacts, which should then lead also to the identification of conflict, synergies, and trade-offs, as I was just showing it to you in the example. And then the measures should be developed in order to optimize the positive incomes. And this should then be presented, or even better, the policymakers or the decision makers are involved then in this process. But as I said, there's not like the one methodological approach. It really has to be, and this is why it's also left open by many authors when they talk about sustainability impact assessment, because it has to be a context relevant approach that is being used. So to conclude, sustainability impact assessments are only those approaches which integrate equally the three sustainability dimensions, which respect their interrelations, which involve stakeholders at every step of the process, and which focus on exchange and learning, and which create really a learning environment. This is key to sustainability impact assessment. So I would hand over back to Camilo.
Yes, thank you very much, Jana, for your enlightening presentation. Now we will hand over the microphone to Katarina, who will tell us a little bit more if the process of assessing sustainable impact assessment is already complex. She will tell us even a more complex process to embed peace-building indicators into ex-ante sustainable impact assessment. So Katarina, please, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Camilo, for your kind introduction, and good day to all of you who are joining today. As Camilo already said, my name is Katarina and I'm working at ZEF Institute. And I want to use this opportunity to introduce peace building to sustainability impact assessment. And this idea is coming because so far sustainability impact assessment does not include explicitly the concept of peace building yet. However, if you follow the notion that there can be no sustainable development without peace, and at the same time also no peace without sustainable development, we consider it crucial to also have peace building integrated into sustainability impact assessment. And thereby we also have the assumption underlying our work that integrating an assessment of peace building potential can actually increase the probability to reach sustainable development. Also, we consider the integration of peace building as even more important in the context of so-called developing countries, as many of those are conflict affected. Important to understand is that to us, peace is not only the absence of violence, but we actually apply a concept of positive peace, where it is also the ability of societies to absorb shocks without falling or relapsing into conflict, and making capacity building agency and social cohesion, thereby crucial pillars of peace building. And in this regard, we align with the definition of peace building, which also says that it's a range of measures that target to reduce the risk of relapsing into conflict. That is important by strengthening the national capacities at all levels for conflict transformation in order to lay foundations for sustainable peace and development. And for the integration of peace building into sustainability impact assessment, we have chosen an already existing tool of sustainability impact assessment, ScalA, which is acronym for Scaling Up Assessment Tool, and it's a decision support tool for assessing and comparing scaling up potential of specific projects or strategies or actions that support agriculture good practices. And we've chosen on the one hand side also this tool with its focus on the implementation of agriculture good practices, as we understand the agricultural sector to be of crucial importance for social, economic and environmental development. ScalA is an ex-ante impact assessment tool and thus should be applied in the planning process of the intervention. And as Jana was already pointing out, as an impact assessment tool, it assesses the economic, environmental and social impacts, and that not only as a separate entities, but actually in interrelations. Important to note that the tool was developed in 2005 and it was actually derived from practice. So nearly 40 different sustainable agricultural project approaches were assessed to derive factors that will define successful or enhance a successful adoption of interventions. And thereby the logic of ScalA is that each project that intends to foster a wider adoption of successful agriculture practices has to meet a certain set of preconditions for its applicability. And those requirements include, for example, financial, human resource, institutional, and infrastructural factors. In the tool itself, as I will show you also in a few slides, these requirements are then always linked to an associated set of factors that determine the success in scaling up the practice. And some requirements, they are only linked to one factor, but others are also linked to multiple factors. And as for our methodological approach, we have enhanced the ScalA tool in the context of a current research project called SLUS, or a current project called SLUS, which is currently coordinated by SIAD in cooperation with ZALF, Juni, and CPAP. And it's a project on reforestation, climate change mitigation, and peace building in Colombia as part of the ICI initiative. And as a first step, what we did for the enhancement or adoption of ScalA tool was actually a screening of the existing ScalA tool to check which of the indicators, nearly 70 indicators that are already part of ScalA, are also important when assessing peace building potential. In a second step, we then identified additional peace building indicators and also then categorized those. We introduced a rating system, and to facilitate the usage of ScalA, especially considering the need to integrate stakeholders, is that we also developed a mobile phone app that is now in combination with the conceptual tool tested and refined, and we will hear more test results of this from Tatiana in the next talk. When assessing the existing tool, we found that there's already 39 indicators that we consider relevant to the assessment of peace building potential, and those are, for example, questions whether the planned intervention improves net income, or whether it allows for more equitable access to resources, or if it fosters trust among resource users. So there were indicators already existing. However, considering our notion of peace and the belief that peace building also requires capacity building for conflict transformation and structural changes, we identified another 18 indicators that were then added to ScalA tool that are grouped in 4 categories: social cohesion, roles of actors, negotiation capacities, and structure transformation. When assessing or rating the peace building potential, we've set up a 2-step approach. And the first approach is a simple assessment of the peace building potential related to the new indicators. And in a second step, it's an assessment cross-calculating the 57 indicators that we identified in ScalA tool towards peace building potential. In case you decided to use ScalA in your work, you would have to go through 9 different steps. It is important that you can also opt out of some steps. So to make it project and context specific, you would not have to apply all steps if they are not relevant to your project planning. And steps include, for example, questions on sustainability, on adaptive capacity to climate change, or also to greenhouse gas emission mitigation, as well as the assessment of peace building potential. And in the first 7 steps, it's a simple rating system of yes and no answers related to the potential of your planned intervention. A characteristic of ScalA is then that you can actually assess very context specific also the scaling up potential. So you would weigh the importance of the number of factors that are part of ScalA, and then you assess the scaling up factor of your planned intervention context specific. Here you can see the different peace building indicators that we've added to the ScalA tool, and looking at the criteria of social cohesion, for example, we ask if the planned project promotes trust building between citizens and states, or, for example, respects traditional practices to manage natural resources. Or looking at agents, we want to know if a project also includes social leaders or contributes to the integration of victims of violence. And also, of course, capacity building related, we want to know if a project promotes support mechanisms for negotiation and decision making, or builds capacity for political participation, to pick a few. In this first part, however, it's again a yes and no ScalA, and you would have the potential. And in the second part, it's where we're using the principle for designing peace building interventions by the UN. And here, for example, related to the first principle, does the project approach address drivers and root causes of conflict? We are cross-calculating 25 different items from ScalA tool. Looking at first test results, most indicators are applicable in practice to foresee probable results of an intervention in terms of peace building potential, thereby assisting agriculture projects to achieve, hopefully, greater impact. However, of course, there is always room for improvement, and we find that some indicators are difficult for interviewees to assess or to respond to directly. For example, the question whether the project contributes to generating historical awareness of violence was not always answered straightforward, but often resulted more in a reflective dialogue by the interviewees. This, however, we think also aligns with criteria of sustainability impact assessment, which means to provide a learning environment and to actually foster a reflection of a planned intervention before it is implemented. In case you want to know more about the tool or want to use it yourself, you could contact us to get the mobile phone app. At the moment, it's Android only, and you could also download it very soon on Google App Store in Spanish and English. Or if you do not have Android, then you can also request from us an offline Excel file to be used. And however, or if you're using it, then of course we would be very happy if you shared your opinions or results with us so we know how ScalA-Peacebuilding is used. And with this, I'm closing my presentation, and I'm very happy that in the next one, Tatiana will give you more insights into the practical usage of ScalA-Peacebuilding. Thank you very much.
No, on the contrary, Katarina, thank you very much to you. But before I pass the microphone or the virtual room to Tatiana, I want to remember all the attendees to please to write all your questions in the panel of questions on the GoToWebinar control panel. But having said this, Tatiana, I give you now the microphone for your presentation. Let me please share it. Okay, now Tatiana, you can begin your presentation. Thank you very much.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining this first webinar. Before I started, I would like to apologize in advance in case you hear any disturbing noise in the back, because many people pass by selling groceries, so I'm sorry in any case.
Sorry, Tatiana, can you make it full screen your
Okay.
PP? Thank you.
You see now?
Yes, now it's perfect. You can go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So to see how this tool works in practice, I will present his application to assess the potential of agroforestry scaling up in Cesar, Colombia. This assessment is carried out across two farming systems, cocoa crops and cattle ranching. So the department of Cesar is located in the northern part of Colombia. Although it holds a high diversity of landscapes, it has suffered an acute loss of ecosystems due to land occupation without environmental planning. That is why the department has land use conflicts now on 64% of his territory. So under this context of land degradation and loss of biodiversity, agroforestry systems for cocoa and cattle farming can simultaneously deal with environmental issues and production shortcomings. Cocoa farming there has been typically established and managed under shade, as is the same in the rest of the country, with varying arrangements that tend to include other permanent and temporary crops. This department has still suitable areas for establishing cocoa crops, and there are still opportunities to improve yield of already established crops. For his part, cattle ranching has been managed extensively for a dual purpose, with high environmental impact and low productivity in the region. So there is a need to intensify and sustainably manage this agricultural activity, and silvopastoral systems are a good alternative to deal with this situation. So despite the potential contribution of agroforestry systems, the scaling up is still limited in Cesar. This is why this case study wants to answer which are the perceived barriers for a successful scaling up of silvopastoral systems and cocoa agroforestry systems in CESAR, Colombia. So to do so, we use ScalA-Peacebuilding mobile app to conduct 10 personal interviews together with my partner Marta del Rio during the month of March of this year. Each interview lasts around 2 hours. So to recap what Katarina already mentioned, ScalA assessing the first 6 steps through yes or no checklist of several indicators for assessing sustainability, adaptive capacity, climate change resilience, adaptation strategies, greenhouse gases mitigation, and of course the new dimension of peace building. And depending on the number of affirmative responses, ScalA rates this contribution as low, medium, or high. In the step 8, ScalA scores the relevance of 11 financial, human, institutional, and agricultural input needs. And step 9 evaluates the compliance of 59 scaling up factors divided in 7 categories in a rating system from 0 to 2. At the end, what ScalA generates is a percentage. That means a deviation from an optimal scaling up situation. So a lower percentage denotes a higher chance for scaling up. So the general results of the first 6 steps in this application shows that nearly 100% of interviewees rate most of the indicators positively to get a high score on each of the steps. Only step 2 related to adaptive capacity of communities to climate change did not achieve a high score in all interviews. This is because some indicators are negatively rated as the approaches used by the institution to promote these systems in the region are not focused on improving, for example, infrastructure or access to transportation, or generate reliable information on climate change and variability. As peace building is the new feature of ScalA, I will focus here on the specific results of this step. As Katarina already mentioned, it has 2 components. The first one, consider existing indicators of the other steps of ScalA, groups them into these 4 principles, and rates the outputs as high, medium, or low. So the general results show that silvopastoral systems and cocoa agroforestry systems highly address these principles in CESAR. The second part of the peace building assessment considered 18 indicators classified under 4 peace building dimensions. So here I pick the indicators that obtain a greater number of affirmative answers in the interviews for both systems and for each of them. So for both, in the case of social cohesion, the analysis showed that approaches used to promote these systems in the region recognize the institution at the local level. Specifically, when promoting cocoa agroforestry systems, institution respects practice regarding natural resources management. And in the case of silvopastoral system, 80% of interviewees consider that trust building between citizens and state is promoted when implementing these systems, because they generate scenarios for the exchange of knowledge, experience, and needs between states, institutions, and farmers. With regards to the agents dimension, the improvement of social relations and the inclusion of social leaders is considered when promoting both systems. All cocoa interviewees and 60% of silvopastoral interviewees consider that it is possible to integrate victims of violence by promoting these systems, because most of them are smallholder farmers who have been displaced and abandoned by the state. In the dimension of conflict transformation and capacity building, we found that it's highly addressed by building capacities for political participation, because the approaches used by institutions promoting these systems generate a sense of belonging to the community and a greater empowerment of it. Besides, the approach used to promote both systems are aligned with institutionalized structures for conflict transformation, such is the case of the development programs with territorial focus, the PDEs. These PDEs seek to define priority rural development projects for communities most affected by the armed conflict. And finally, in the dimension of reparation, what we found was that 100% of interviewees considered that these systems could contribute to repair the environmental damage caused by the violent conflict. 60% of silvopastoral interviewees consider that this system contributes to the compensation of victims, and is similar to COCOA, and 80% says the same, because these systems offer more opportunities for farmers to stay in the countryside with better living conditions. Now I will pass to the part of the evaluation of resource requirements to implement silvopastoral system and cocoa agroforestry system in this region. Experts find the first 8 resource requirements to be medium or highly relevant for the implementation of agroforestry system. For example, know-how and skills and additional labor are also perceived as medium and highly demanding resources for both, since they incorporate more elements into the production system, such as trees, legumes, temporary crops. And of course, they require proper management based on technical knowledge and skills. In the case of additional land, is scored as not relevant or with low relevance for both systems, because cattle farms, for example, are now large enough, and the implementation of silvopastoral systems implies the intensification of their production activities, which means less land. In the case of cocoa farms, these are traditional family farms that cannot establish larger plantations due to labor limitation. So finally, the last step of ScalA evaluates the scaling up potential of both systems in the region. So here we found that cocoa agroforestry systems are better evaluated in the case of the attributes of the systems. It includes the easy to understand the system, the availability of inputs to implement the system. So in this case, cocoa get better results because the percentage is lower. So in this case, the percentage is a deviation from an optimal situation. So a lower percentage means a highest possible scaling up potential. So in this case, cocoa get higher scores in attributes of the systems in terms of the political institutional framework at national and local level, in terms of economic conditions, and in terms of community attitudes. So in general, cocoa agroforestry systems get a higher percentage of success rate than silvopastoral systems, but as you see, the difference is not so big. At the end, we analyze the rating of the different scaling up factors to identify the different barriers for a successful scaling up of both systems. So in general, there are not conducive economic conditions in the regions to promote both cocoa agroforestry systems and silvopastoral systems. The taking into account the financial resources of farmers. And in the other side, there are not reasonable prices. There are not enough private actors who may also gain from agroforestry. There is a lack of processing and marketing facilities and a lack of certification structures. In the case of silvopastoral systems, there are not easy to understand in some cases, so there is a need of a lot of extension services and building of capacities. Cattle farmers also perceive security problems in the region. They also perceive that there is not financial and human capacities of the local government to support the dissemination of the system, and the same is for the availability of local organizations that support this dissemination. And specifically for cocoa agroforestry systems, there are some lacks in the availability of well-educated technical and management staff in the region. There is still a lack of government promotion through education, research, and extension programs. In Cesar, there is also a problem of uncertainty in terms of use and access rights of land. And finally, a lack of infrastructures such as roads and irrigation. So these were the barriers that we identify using ScalA tool. So thank you so much. And I hand over again to Camilo to moderate the discussion.
Okay, so thank you very much to all of you. Let's switch on the cameras to see each other again. And let's now go to the questions. So far we have a few. So I will take them, I will read them to you. Let me first make me present again. Yeah. So a second, please. Stuff. Let me present. Show my screen. So here we are. Can you see the live stream? Yeah. Okay. Question and answer section. I will take the question now from the panel. Let's see. We have we can begin for the more complex to the more easiest. No, kidding. Okay, this is a nice question for all of you panelists. It says from Charles, I think that sustainable impact assessment presupposes the coupling of economic growth from environmental degradation. Is this presupposition a reality or a delusion, especially in developing countries? What do you think? Jana, Katarina, and Tatiana, what is your answer to this question?
Camilo, can you repeat the question? Can you read it again?
Yes, of course. It says from Charles, I think sustainable impact assessment presupposes a decoupling of economic growth from environmental degradation. Is this presupposition a reality or a delusion, especially in developing countries? Anyone want to take over the answer? Or shall we continue with the next one?
No, maybe I can do it.
Okay, thank you, Tatiana. Can you please go ahead?
I think that Jana at the beginning said that one of the pre-assumptions of sustainability impact assessment is that the intervention didn't don't cause any damage in any of the different dimensions of sustainability. So it's the same for ScalA. The idea is that at least one dimension could be improved through the implementation of any intervention, and any other dimension could be affected. So I think that that's the idea of sustainability impact assessment, to improve at least one of the dimension of sustainability. I don't know if my answer responds.
Yeah, of course. Any other want to answer, Katarina, Jana?
Yeah, I would also like to say something regarding this. Well, as Tatiana said, of course, sustainability impact assessment is just an approach in order to, well, let's say, identify where are challenges and where might be negative impacts, and then it has, of course, the potential to realize what are those negative impacts, and then to reduce or mitigate and work actively against those possible negative impacts that are identified. And even if this might not be possible due to some external reasons, at least it raises the awareness that we are aware that there could be a negative impact on this and that issue. Yeah, so okay. I hope I understood it properly, the question, and that I gave a answer that answered it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We can jump to the next question. Samira is saying, looking at your experiences of applying sustainable impact assessment, what lesson have you taken away for successfully engaging with local perspectives? Example, sustainability, food security, within the scope of a predefined framework? This is a question for all of you. What are the local perspectives with how the SIA can link up local perspectives when it's a predefined framework? How do you address methodologically these issues to take up the voices of the locals? Who wants to answer the question?
Yeah, this is Jana.
Okay, Jana.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what I can say is, because for this methodological framework that we had used, it's a different one than we also used ScalA, but more for the researchers' evaluation. But for the evaluation and the sustainability impact assessment with the farmers themselves, we've used another methodological approach. And it was very interesting because the lesson learned was really because we did the evaluation on the same indicators with the same measures, and the researchers, they evaluated it completely different, or not completely, but there were high differences between the evaluation results from the researchers' perspective and from the local perspectives. And there were several elements that we did not see and that we could not see as external or as researchers, not even as a local researcher, let's say, because there are so many aspects in culture or in history in a place where you will work, etc., that you cannot know and that only the locals can link. And this is why there were several potential conflicts that were identified that we could then really work on in order to mitigate this negative impact that was foreseen by the farmers themselves. And I think this was really like the most important lessons learned for myself, that we could have not identified it without really linking with the local stakeholders, let's say, the local farmers. Yeah, from the researchers' perspective, it would have not been possible, and also not from the Tanzanian researchers that were there.
Okay, thank you very much, Jana. I think that we have a few minutes more, but then I will address the next question. We have one question from Julian. It says, how can we use the results of ScalA to improve the scalability of COCOA and silvopastoral system in CESAR? What would you consider the key factors that to improve for the scalability potential of these two systems? I guess this is for Tatiana.
Yes, I guess. Hey, Julian, thanks for your question. As I presented at the end, with the ScalA, we identified the barriers for scaling both systems there. And the main barrier, as I mentioned, was the lack of conducive economic condition at the regional level. So I think that our project is in this line to create some business model to promote those systems in the regions. So I think that we are now in a good path to improve the scalability of these systems in this region. But in the other side is the role of the government, because many of the interviewees perceive the lack, for example, of infrastructure, and in the case of cocoa agroforestry systems, the lack of irrigation systems in this region. And there are also a bit of inequality in terms of water use, and of course the problem of land rights in the part where cocoa is cultivated. So I think that this is the role of the government to improve this scalability. But in the other part that I already mentioned at the beginning, I think that our project is in the correct path.
Okay, thank you, Tatiana. We have a question. We have a request from our attendees that they say if we can switch on the cameras when we are answering the questions. So thank you very much. So Tatiana, please, Jana, if you can, and Tatiana, if you can switch on your cameras. We will take. Thank you very much. So we will take two questions more. This says, nice presentation, and said, because data is collected through interviews, did you experience any risk of bias in the measurement of the answers for the ScalA?
Okay, I think that maybe because most of the institutions that we interview are implementing these systems in the region. So in a way, ScalA at the end, for example, in the scaling up potential, evaluate the capacities of implementing institutions. So in a way, maybe people could have a positive view of his particular work in the areas. But we also try to, with Marta, to record the interviews to capture the complex perspectives about each one of the indicators. And we also interview different institutions, including education institution, some research institution in the region, and some NGOs with different perspectives. So I think that in that way it is possible to avoid this bias. And of course, it could be possible to do this kind of interviews in a different way, or maybe adapt some indicators to evaluate it with farmers. But this time was a bit difficult because the situation that we are living right now. But this is another way to avoid this bias, I think so.
Okay, thank you, Tatiana. The time is almost over, but I will take the last question from Marcondes. It says how to incorporate the knowledge of traditional people and communities in impact assessments with the same value of the technical information. Is this possible? Thank you, he says.
I try to answer again. I think that it is possible. Maybe we use the knowledge of, for example, technical assistants in the region, because most of them are very local and sometimes also farmers. So I think that it is possible to get some technical information from them. And of course, we can adapt the indicators in a way that could be understandable for farmers. And I think that this tool, ScalA tool, has been implemented with farmers in another region. So it is possible.
Any other talk about it?
Yeah, I would
Jana,
like to...
you can.
Yeah, I also wanted to say something against that, concerning that. I think that it's absolutely necessary and valuable to integrate the knowledge of local farmers or of the local people who are concerned by a certain measure. It's more, depends really more on our perspective, we as researchers, that we have to change, that about its value, and that it's key, in fact, to really find adopted solutions. As I've said, as we have done it in Tanzania, but as I also know it now in my in the projects that I am monitoring, etc. We do a lot of let's say farmers-led research, or really research like active research, participatory research with the farmers, because it's really crucial to test with them what is really applicable, not only from a technical point of view, but also from a cultural point of view, and also from a contextual point of view, because some things might maybe last if we test them as researchers or external experts somehow for the moment when we're there, but what is really possible to integrate for a longer term can only be identified by the farmers. So so action research, for example, with farmers seems to be really key for successful projects. I mean, this is my experience now from this project that we've did with ZEF, but also from many other projects that I'm looking after at the moment in several, in some countries.
You want to add something, Tatiana or Katarina?
Yeah, maybe just to say that I think that it's important about sustainability impact assessment tools, or at least the ScalA or FOPIA that Jana is referring to, is that you can adapt them very much to the context that you apply them to. And I know that, for example, in other projects where FOPIA has been used, you can work with farmers and you can establish yourself the different factors they regard as relevant. And I mean, then you can play around with beans of the area, if that's a common material, for example, or stones, and you have them all rate the importance. So you can really adapt also tools to the different context that is needed, and then always transfer it back then to your research level if needed. So I think what it's important to bear in mind is make it always context specific, and also all the tools have shortcomings, but as Tatiana is already pointing out, then we have to balance it with additional methods to kind of balance those and get a more holistic picture on the complex issues that we are all working in.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think the time for this webinar is over, but the conversation continues. Thank you for the panelists and thank you for the attendees. I wish we see you each other in the next webinar on the 25th of June. Hello, ciao everyone. Have a nice
Bye-bye.
day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.